exciting and new. Come aboard, we're expecting you. And love, life's sweetest reward, let it flow, it floats back to you. Soon we'll be making another run. The love boat promises something for everyone. Set a course for adventure, your mind on.
Mark and Brian, Mark 2.0, and we welcome Gopher and Issac, Fred Grandy, and Ted Lange to the Mark 2.0 podcast. This is such an honor, guys.
Forgotten but not gone.
Never forgotten. You guys are legends.
That's why they invented Google, because if you can't remember us, all you got to do is Google the name.
Now, listen, the internet is the best thing that ever happened to us.
Yeah.
I've been talking to people all day, and the number of people that didn't know you guys is zero.
Exactly.
Zero. Young and old. Yep, I know love. Oh yeah, I know those guys. You know, are epic and iconic now, to say the least.
Thank you.
The one thing I
Very
never
much.
Great to have
understood.
you.
I never understood. Obviously, we knew how popular the show was when it was on the air, and we knew how popular it was in reruns. But I never expected to span as many generations as it did. I mean, you guys had to be tots if you were anything other than embryos when the show came out.
Well,
and your generation is part of our biggest fan base.
Oh yeah.
You know that?
I'm old enough to just be 5 networks on TV, okay, and that was it. So I'm that old, okay.
Wow.
So that's something right there.
Yeah.
So I understand it going from prime time to reruns to, you know, lesser time slots, and to see a show do that, you get to know a show very well. And on the Love Boat, you were the guys where everyone said, shh, because they're coming on, they're going to say something funny.
Yeah, exactly.
That was it. And that was it. And that was what made the Love Boat really great, because you guys, and I tell this story, and I hope someone wants to elaborate on it. I said, you know, I'm getting to talk to him for the first time. Mark's talked to him before, but what really grabbed me was they had to write their own stuff to even really shine as bright as they did. And everyone was like, you're kidding. I said, no, they were just more background people, had a little something maybe, but had to go to, didn't you have to go to somebody and say, hey, can we throw this in to spice it up?
It was more rewriting than writing. Fred and I would go sit in a trailer, we'd read the scene. Remember this, Fred? We'd read a scene and go, oh man, what if you do this and I do that, and to the credit of the writers, we would say, can we show you, we would do the scene their way, and then we say, can we show you something? And they would invariably let us run with our take on it.
That's an important point, because what you don't do is show up on the set and say, you know what, this really sucks. and if you do that, you've alienated not just one writer, but the entire staff. And we had 9 or 10 of them. So we would always graciously say, okay, let's do this. We see if we can make it work. And a lot of this stuff just flopped, you know, and usually we were brought on to end a scene with some kind of a kicker or a tag, and it would die, you know, it would lie there. And so then we would go off and say, okay, let's try this, let's try that. And, you know, Love Boat was shot, it was an hour show, it was shot in 6 days, which means we were doing 10 pages a day. That's practically forced labor, okay? So the writers were desperate for stuff to work. And if Ted and I came up with something that put a button on a scene, that's what they used to call it, a button. They'd say, oh, yeah, that's good, guys. That's good, guys. And it would invariably wind up in the show. So, I mean, we made friends of these guys as opposed to enemies, and that's the way we were able to hang on.
Now, let me
That's a
say
whole
this.
fascinating perspective. I mean, the guys were desperate. You guys were there. Did they take good care of you to help them like that? Or was it just a team effort and one team, one dream sort of thing?
Well, it started out, they didn't really know who we were, and they didn't write very well for us, and particularly not very well for Ted. But over time, we became allies. And then after a while, they got to know us. They started to write for us. Never as well as we wrote for ourselves. You understand?
Sorry, I cut off Ted. Sorry, Ted. Go ahead.
Go
Well,
ahead.
Fred was talking about we do 9-10 pages a day, which in the 70s that was really a lot of work. I was just interviewed recently by the people over at Tyler Perry Studios, and he said, "Well, you know, Ted, we want to get directors, but we do 9 pages a day." And I said, "No, that's not a problem." He said, "No, you don't understand. 9 pages a day." And I said, "No, you don't understand. That's what I'm used to." You know, so we'll see what happens after this strike, if I get a gig or not. I'll let you know, guys.
Nice.
Yeah,
Very
that's
cool.
assuming the strike will end. I'm not
Oh
sure.
my
Oh,
God! Yeah.
wow, Fred.
You know, the actors are
Yeah.
supposed to go out at the end of this month. SAG is
Okay.
supposed to
Half
go
of
on
them are
strike.
already on the line, man.
Oh yeah, no. I mean, if the actors go out, it's gonna be an apocalypse. You know.
Did you see Mandy Patinkin's little video on the line?
No.
Oh my God, he's an emotional guy.
Oh yeah.
Talking to the studios, you know.
Now
But
you know the directors were supposed to strike too, but they've already settled.
no, they settled and they sent us letters showing what we got, you know.
Did you get anything?
Huh? Oh yeah. No,
Right.
they did real well. They did real well
Okay.
because the whole thing is about streaming and residuals and all of that.
And AI.
Yes.
Oh
AI.
yeah, that's right.
Very important. Yes, very important. So they seem to have done all right.
You know, my son is a writer. He started out on the Daily Show and moved to Saturday Night, and then wrote for The Office and the Mindy Project, and he's a showrunner now for this animated series called Velma, and
Which is from what cartoon series?
Scooby-Doo.
Huh?
Oh
From
yeah,
Scooby-Doo.
Scooby-Doo.
It's
Wow, of course.
Scooby-Doo,
Yeah.
right.
Scooby.
Wow.
All right. But you know, he is very concerned that Chat GPT and various other forms of AI will essentially come in and co-opt a lot of writers. You know, because what they'll do is they'll take an idea from a writer and then put it into an algorithm. And the algorithm will turn out the script, and you know it'll be crap, but you know it's awesome.
My nephew showed me that. He was bragging about it, and he did like 4 elements, put it in AI, and then he showed me the end product, and it was so awful.
Yeah.
He thought I was going to champion, and I said, no. Ben, look at this. This is awful. And I showed him there was no imagination, no creativity. They just hit the salient points that were given to it, you know? But there was no imagination.
That crap had been around when we were doing Love Boat. We never would have gotten out of the gate.
Yeah.
No,
they
not
never
at
would
all.
have used us to sweeten.
That's for sure.
AI, it's terrible.
So
And as
anyway,
you're telling me how much you're doing, I'm thinking all these people are getting paid all the time. This is not done from home and stuff like that. I mean, there's crews there and you guys are trying to go through all these things. So, I mean, that's a very expensive thing. Isn't that the time of like Aaron Spelling and all that? Or is that too before that? And
No, we were Aaron Spelling.
that was Aaron Spelling's show.
Yeah, it was a Spelling show. And it was one of the things that kicked his company into overdrive because it made so much money. It made a ton of dough. And they used to put stuff up against us and we would kill it.
Yeah, like Kojak.
You put that. We killed Carol Burnett.
She
went up against Carol Burnett and she was gone the next year. You know? So we were very, very strong, very popular. a populist show. The audience loved us.
The critics hated it. Critics said it was going to sink like the Titanic.
Yeah.
They made nothing but these, puerile maritime jokes. But the show was a hit by the third airing. I mean, it took off and never stopped. And at that time, this would have been late 70s, early 80s. ABC was known as Aaron's Broadcasting Company.
Ah.
He was so powerful.
Yes.
He had
Yeah, indeed.
Love Boat. He had Charlie's Angels. He had Heart to Heart.
All the
Starsky
TV
Hutch.
movies, Fred. All the
Oh,
TV movies.
sure.
Nobody
Okay.
else could do a TV movie.
Wow.
If you
Yeah.
wanted a TV movie on ABC, you had to bring it to Aaron.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy was an absolute megalon. He was a megastar.
Yeah. And now you're really passionate about this. Can you tell our this strike, our viewers, can you please explain the core problem and why this strike is happening? Can someone just throw that out for our viewers here? Because it seems to be really a big part of you guys' lives right now.
Well, that you have streaming platforms, and they're not paying residuals or anything to the writer and the product that the writer makes. So how do you manage that? How do you judge that? How do you keep an accounting for that? Okay, and that's one of the things that they're doing, because on network TV and on syndicated TV, every time you have a run, you get paid.
Sure.
And now with streaming and so many platforms out there, they're trying to get around paying you, although they'll get money from someone that wants to buy HBO, or you know what I'm saying, or what are the other Paramount Plus?
Well, Netflix, but here's another thing that in the writers struck in 2007, and that was a 100-day strike, and at that point, streaming was just becoming a thing. Netflix was beginning to get out of the disc business and into streaming, and Amazon was coming along. So the writers at the time weren't sure what streaming was going to be like, and so they pretty much gave the producers what they wanted on that, which was a latitude in not paying the same level of residuals. Well, the studios then took that and started figuring ways to not pay writers for the work that they'd pay them in broadcast and cable, okay? And they started creating these things called mini rooms. Now, when you have a show, you have a writer's room, and it's literally a room. Did you guys ever watch The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel? Did you ever see that show?
I think I've seen a couple episodes, yeah.
All right, well, anyway, and we had one on our show. The writers sit in a room and they bounce around ideas, and they put out kind of the structure of a show, and then they go off and write the scenes. Well, normally what you do is you hire a team of writers to write a pilot, and then you bring them on if the show's picked up, and they write. What the studio started to do was hire small groups of writers to write some pilot episodes, but with no guarantee they'd be hired if the show went to series. And they got away with that because there was so much product on Netflix and Amazon and Hulu and all of these streaming platforms now, Paramount Plus, that everybody said, well, everybody's working, so who cares? Well, when the industry started to contract, they said, oh my God, we can't afford to do this anymore. So they started looking away. And that's really what the strike is about. That and artificial intelligence, which is obviously, if the studios can figure out a way to get a machine to do what writers used to do, they're going to do that. Right?
I wrote a pilot for Lou Gossett Jr. because he had an in at Walper Productions. So we went over to Walper and we pitched our pilot. Now, I'll tell you what the pilot is. The pilot is the Harlem Renaissance, which was Harlem back in the 20s, the 30s, the 40s, okay? And they loved the idea. David Walper was no longer around. It was his son. they loved it. And Lou and I were bouncing off each other, and they say, "Can you add this element?" Yeah, we can add this element. We'll do it this way. Whether I said we got this element, we got that. So we sold the pilot. Okay. Then they came back with a contract, and they didn't want to give us anything except credit. They would give us creative by credit. They didn't want to give us any money. They would own it. Okay.
Yeah.
They would own it, and we would just be hired guns. Okay. But we wouldn't have, we came up with the idea. We were going to create it, and they weren't going to give us a piece. Okay, now fade out, because Lou Gossett's lawyer said, "Hey, I know those guys that are over there now. You don't want this deal." So we said, "Okay." So then I had another friend that was working at an animation studio. I pitched the thing to my friend. He says, "Let me get the boss." The boss came in, pitched it. I pitched it without Lou this time. I said, "Hey, that's a great idea." I said, "Okay." He says, "We're going to do an animated series on the Harlem Renaissance." I said, "Okay, great." Then they came up with the contract, and they gave us less. Yes, guys, they didn't want to give us anything.
Yeah.
They said, "We'll give you $3,000, and then we own it."
$3,000.
Wow.
$3,000, I'm telling you. And they didn't, I mean, they did it with a straight face, as if I've never been in the business. You know, it's like I didn't know anything. Oh, great, $3,000. So again, we passed. So that's part of what the Writers Guild is going through, is that when they do give you something, it's so much less than the value of what they're doing. And that's part of the problem.
And actors have the same problem, because, you know, obviously their residuals are different now that you have streaming being probably the major distribution of whatever product you turn out, even more so than cable or certainly broadcast. I mean, how many broadcast shows are there now that actually do 22? We did 25 episodes a year.
Oh yeah.
And in some cases they were 2-hour movies. Okay. You could make a good living doing that. And you didn't even have to be the star of the show. You could just be, you know, a recurring character from time to time, or guest shots. Can't do that anymore. Because
But you're lucky to get 8 episodes a year.
If you get 8, you're lucky, which means you have to do 2 or 3 shows a year, or wait tables. I mean, it's a whole different economic model now.
If you get a network show and you're doing 11 or 22 or whatever, I was watching an interview with Hugh. What's the guy's name? Hugh, who he's an English actor.
Hugh Dancy?
Not Hugh Dancy.
Hugh Grant.
Hugh Grant.
Okay.
Hugh Grant did an interview where he he did a movie with Meryl Streep, and one of the kids from the Big Bang Theory.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Was in the movie. He had a bit part in the movie, and he said, I kind of snubbed my nose at him. I said, "Well, this guy's a TV actor," and blah blah blah.
Yeah, we've never had to deal with that, have we?
Yeah, but he said he watched the kid, and the kid is Sandy Helberg's kid, Fred.
Oh, Simon.
Simon.
Yeah.
So he watched Simon, and he came to realize, from the money that he made on network TV on the Big Bang, the guy was richer than he was.
Oh, sure.
Oh, sure.
Especially on that.
Yeah, the guy was richer than he was, and more famous. Because when they would go out to eat or whatever, everybody recognized him. That's the good news about network TV, you know?
Yeah. And we were huge beneficiaries of that.
Yeah. Oh, man.
We were in like the last era where television was your only choice. You know, you said it yourself, Bram. There were 5 channels, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
we
that's
knew when and where they were on. You better be ready.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
you
yeah,
did, you know, you weren't taping shows to watch later. There was no on-demand stuff.
Yeah.
So it was destination viewing.
People
And
would arrange their days to see us.
and because of that, people like Teddy and me and the folks that were on shows from really from about the mid 70s through the end of the 80s, early 90s. We were a captive, we were essentially like the studios were in the 30s. We were an audience of celebrities, and you know, you'd do the Tonight Show, you'd do game shows, you'd do Battle of the Network Stars, and everybody would know who you were. Well, you know, isn't that right?
Yeah,
I mean, that's
no,
what
yeah.
you did.
That's right.
We were professional celebrities.
Yeah.
Sometimes we'd act, sometimes not. But I mean, that's the way it was. It's not that way anymore unless you're,
No.
you know, you're way up at the top.
Yeah.
And there aren't many people like that.
Wow. What's it like to do a game show? That
Oh,
must
I
have been
loved
a
it.
riot.
I loved it. I mean, it was one of those things. If you did something like, well, I did a lot of match games. Remember match
Oh
games?
yeah, I love match
Gene Rayburn.
games.
Okay. So, and they all worked the same format. It was usually done on Saturday. And you would show up at about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. You had to bring 5 changes of clothes because they shot every week's show, every day's show, one right after the other. So you'd do a show, you'd take a break, you'd go, you'd change your clothes, and you'd come out and do it again. And, you know, it'd be from 1 o'clock until about 6 o'clock. And you'd be sitting around with guys like Charles Nelson Riley and Brett Summers. And
Fred, do you
Yeah.
remember? Do you remember this when you were doing Match Game, and I was a surprise? I came on the
Yeah.
Match Game, and I said to Gene Rayburn, the host, I said, "Listen, I got to do another game show over here, and Fred's got my clothes." And so Fred got up, took off his pants, took off his jacket, and gave it to
Yeah.
me, and I left to go do a different game show.
yes, that's what we did then.
Yeah.
was
We had fun like that back then.
Yeah.
You know, you could have some fun with the format. You know.
Yeah, and it was a company of players. Everybody knew everybody else, you know, and there was a lot of camaraderie, and it was a great gig. Now, if you went to, I used to do remember the $25,000 pyramid?
Oh yeah, Dick Clark. Yeah, I love
They
that
did
one.
that one in New York.
Gosh.
Okay?
Oh,
They
okay.
did that show in New York.
Whoa.
So if they asked you to do the $25,000 pyramid, here's what you got. They flew you to New York first class. They put you up in a 5-star hotel. They took you to lunch at 21, and they gave you tickets to a Broadway show. And that was
did they?
Oh yeah,
Wow.
no.
Jeez.
No. And that was for, you know, another 6 or 7 hour day working with Dick Clark doing the game show. You know, you'd come in and you'd do the show, and then you'd be done. You'd go out and you'd have dinner and see a Broadway show and fly home. I mean, it was
You know, the other thing that was good about our show is we had old timers on our show, and there was a difference.
yeah, you mean like us now.
Yeah.
No,
like-
you guys still look great. You guys are
Like
young
who?
as can be.
Anyway, they would come on, and you could learn from them how to be a celebrity and how to handle people that were your fans. I was in New York. I was doing a game show. I was staying in the same hotel as Florence Henderson.
Oh, the Brady.
So I called her up. I said,
Wonderful
"How you
lady.
doing?" You know, da 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 da. She said, "Yeah, I'm doing the game show." I said, "Yeah, I'm doing it tomorrow." Blah blah blah. She says, "Why don't we have dinner?" I said, "Okay."
Unreal.
So we went to Sardi's. I don't know if you know Sardi's, but it's a big fancy restaurant in New York that a lot of celebrities go to, and they got caricatures of celebrities around the world.
Broadway shows usually have their opening night party at
Oh.
Sardi's.
Mm.
At
It's pretty
Sardi's.
standard.
Yeah.
Whoa,
So
wow.
we had dinner, and I watched Florence Henderson handle people that would come up to the table. And she was amazing because she kept them in a position where they were so thrilled to meet her. But she would say, "You know, I'm having dinner. Where are you sitting?" "Well, we're sitting over there." She says, "Well, why don't I come over to your table after I finish eating?" Now, I've seen other people go, hey, I'm trying to eat here. What are you doing?
Yeah,
Why are you
sure.
bothering me? Blah, blah, blah. Not Florence. Florence knew. She said, listen, let me just finish my meal. I'll come over. It's your wife's birthday. I'll come over and I'll say happy birthday to your wife. We can take a selfie. She was amazing. And that was the good thing about our show is I remember Greer Garson coming on our show. You don't know who that is, but you can Google her. Anyway,
famous actress of the 40s.
yeah, she came on the show and she knew everybody's name. She knew the director, the director of photography, the grips. She knew people's names, so she would say, "Good morning, Mr. Wells. How are you?"
Wow.
You know, I mean, it was
How
a
do you
class
even do
act.
that? Wow.
And
yeah.
it was interesting because there were always people who were very gracious, like Florence and others. But there were also people who came on the show who had been huge stars and then had totally burned out. And in many cases, it's because their behavior was so abhorrent that they got themselves ostracized from the business. One of those people was Troy Donahue. Troy Donahue was a huge star in the late 50s and early 60s, Peyton Place and all. But he was a dick. Okay, I mean the guy did all kinds of things to alienate people, and so he goes into the dark night of the soul after nobody will hire him for 20 years, and he winds up on our show later. Sweetest, nicest guy you'd ever want to know, but contrite. And we were talking, and I said, Troy, this was not the image we thought we had of you. He said, well, I kind of learned the hard way, and it's not that hard to be nice.
Yeah.
And he wasn't alone. There were other guys like that, and many of them had just kind of taken their stardom, exploited it, and penalized themselves because of their behavior. And then later in life, and I guess Troy Donahue at this point was early 50s, something like that.
Do you remember Robert Walden?
Yeah.
Robert Walden did a TV guy interview, and he said, I'm an actor. I would never do a piece of crap like Love Boat.
Wow.
Okay? So Aaron Spelling saw this and offered this guy so much money because he wasn't seeing that from MTM. MTM was more prestige than money.
That's the Mary Tyler Moore Show, Bob Newhart.
Yeah,
those shows.
And he did the Lou Grant show. He was on Lou.
Oh,
Grant. Well, he came on our show, and we gave that guy a hard time.
That's awesome.
Because he had denigrated our show. And finally, he came around to all of us and apologized for what he said.
Nice.
He said, but
they threw a lot of money at him, right?
Yeah.
And in fact, it was more than he expected. And
that
really turned him around and like, whoa, I didn't realize the scope of what I was dealing with here.
Right. Exactly.
Wow, that's impressive.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
Well, but going back to one of the things we talked about earlier, that when Love Boat first came on the air, it was not a critical hit. It was vilified by the critics. They made fun of it. They lambasted it. But the show was an enormously popular hit. And ABC was just over the moon that they had this huge money making in the cruise industry, which was pretty much non-existent when we started, was completely resuscitated and proliferated hugely because of it. But talk
about Harry. Talk about Harry.
Well, Harry who?
Harry Truman.
Oh, okay.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, we want to hear about this.
We were going to ask you for sure.
Well, I mean, Ted and I have been working in the theater largely for the last several years. And like a lot of actors during the pandemic, we got kicked out of work because, the theaters we were supposed to go out and do a tour of I'm Not Rappaport, but that, crashed and burned because the theaters were shutting down. So Ted and some other folks that we worked with, a very well-known Broadway actor and director named Hunter Foster and a couple of other people, formed this little company to look for shows that theaters might produce during the pandemic because they were easy to produce, didn't cost a lot of money, and didn't have to worry a lot about pandemic protocols, because during the pandemic, you had to wear a mask all the time. You had to sanitize the props every time you went off stage. You have to, you could only have a certain number of people on stage, and they had to be 6 feet apart. It was impossible. So we started looking for a one-person show, and I had found this thing called Give 'Em Hail Harry, which was a play that James Whitmore had done 50 years ago. And so I reread it and I said, God, this is not only a good show, it's very current. So we put it together and rewrote it a little bit and did it first at the Aspen Theater Festival and then around the country. And this guy, Hunter Foster, directed it and Ted directed it. And so that launched our, what?
Where are you going to be now? Where's your next gig?
Well, we're going to be in Binghamton, New York on October 7th and 8th. Ted just directed it in Indiana last September.
How much can you tell us about it, what it's about and stuff?
Well, it is essentially a memory play with Harry Truman essentially talking through his entire career. And the guy started very humble origins. He was a farmer. He was a failed haberdasher. He was a county government guy who lost his job because he stood up to the Ku Klux Klan.
If you see a picture of Harry Truman and you see Fred dressed and ready to go on, they look the same.
Wow.
Fred really converts his look. You can go online. There he is.
Oh yeah,
yeah. We did this comes from, we did it in Michigan outside of Ann Arbor.
Oh wow!
Last a year ago, December. And that's the poster that we use. But Ted directs it and Hunter directs it, and so it's been something that we've really come back to. But Ted and I are also doing a production of Inherit the Wind. You know that play? The play about the Scopes Monkey trial, Clarence Darrow versus William
banning books.
Book banning, yeah.
Wow.
You know, as if books were not being banned right now, right?
Yeah, right.
This play was
how
written.
relevant is that?
This play was written 70 years ago, and it's still going on. So we're going to do that in Syracuse in February. But all of this is pretty much because of the reflected glory of Love Boat, right? I mean, we wouldn't be getting gigs like this if we were still trying to climb the ladder.
Well, and plus, though, you deliver the goods. I have to say this: when you come and see him as Harry Truman, he delivers the good.
Well, I mean, we're no slouches, right? I mean,
no,
we're pretty good in Rappaport too. I mean,
we did all right in Rappaport.
Yeah, we're actually pretty good for guys that have been in the business for 50 years. I mean,
you don't look it, that's for sure. 50 years.
The laughs landed. We got our laughs.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say, you know, again, television is disparaged by film actors and some stage actors. But if you can learn to make a scene work on TV, given the short amount of time you have to get it up and on the air, you learn something. You know, actors who have 6 weeks to rehearse, God bless them. I wish I had that. We would have 6 minutes sometimes. And you had to make it work. And if you couldn't do that, you didn't get hired, particularly in comedy, you know? And so there was a real, I think, craft and skill to television acting that a lot of people don't appreciate unless they have to do it themselves. And that was another thing. You know, we would get actors who would come on the show, many of them mostly stage actors, and they would say, God, you guys work fast. Are we done with that scene already? And I said, no, we have to move on. 10 pages a day, dude. I mean,
you were trained. You wow, well, you guys are no slouches. I mean, Fred, I'm a great admirer of what you did with your news thing too. Ted, I'm not exactly as familiar. What did you do between Love Boat and well, how long did that keep? What'd you do after that?
I did a lot of theater. I wrote plays.
He's written 25 plays. She's written more
Wow.
plays than I have checks.
Unreal.
Yeah.
I got
I like that.
25 plays. I'm doing one of my plays. I'm doing a reading of one of my plays in Portland, Oregon in August 19th at the Pacific Northwest Culture Center. I have a called Blues in My Coffee, and it's a Black Lives Matter play. Then I'm going to be doing, I have a play about a comedy about 4 Black women over 40. I'm going to be doing that at the Houston Ensemble Theater next season on the 24th, 2024. And what's the other? Oh, and I've got a Shakespeare. I wrote a couple of Shakespearean themed plays. So one of them is Othello. It's written in iambic pentameter, and it's a prequel to the play, because I would bump into particularly Black audience. They say, "Hey, man, you like Shakespeare?" I go, "Yeah, I do." They said, "Well, what is it? I saw this play with this Black guy. What was this about?" I said, "Well, that was about this over here." They said, "Well, what was this other thing with the white girl and so and so?" And so I decided to write a prequel. And so what happens is you can go see my prequel, and then it goes right into Shakespeare's Othello. So that's the kind of stuff I do now. I love directing. I just love directing. I love writing plays. I'm doing right now. I wrote a play about Shylock from a positive point of view.
Wait, what's that?
Merchant of Venice.
Shylock is a play Shakespeare wrote. It's called Merchant of Venice. And what they do is they treat Jewish people in a derogatory way with derogatory stereotypes. And what I did was, when there was this whole mess about immigrants and all of that going on, and some of the things, I decided to take a play. I could have done it about Mexicans, because that's kind of what was Spanish-speaking people, but I decided to go further back, and I went back to Merchant of Venice, which is a Shakespearean play. I wrote this. We've done it a couple of places on Amazon, not Amazon, on Zoom. We've done it a couple of places, but a friend of mine said, "Ted, that's an opera." And I went to my musician, a friend of mine that's a jazz musician, and I said, "Hey, Gerald Trotman, let's turn this into an opera." He said, "Ted, I don't have any interest in doing an opera."
Oh man.
So I said, "Well, what do you like?" He says, "I like jazz." I said, "Well, then let's turn it into a jazz piece." So that's what we're working on right now. He's been sending me the music for the last month, and I can't wait. And I think I may have a place in San Francisco to do it when it's completed, but it's really, really a good idea, and it seems to be working. So that's the kind of, now I'm creative. Fred is creative. You know, Fred is like saying, "Well, let's do Inherit to Win." And he and I sat down. I was in California, he was in North Carolina, and we edited the play.
Yeah, we essentially adapted it for a more modern audience and a smaller stage. But it's still very relevant. I mean, I read somewhere there are at least 1,600 books that have either been banned or limited by libraries and schools around the country. Are you
I believe
kidding
it.
me?
Yeah.
That includes stuff like To Kill a Mockingbird and Huckleberry Finn and you know, some others. Toni Morrison's books.
Toni
Morrison,
come on. The Bluest Eye.
Really?
Yes.
Bluest Eye is the book I'm talking about. So you know, and I've been, when I started going through and adapting this play about Harry Truman, I started looking at some of the old plays that were classics. Inherit the Wind was written in the 50s as a critical piece of Joe McCarthy. It was about the McCarthy hearings, or it was supposed to be. And I'm saying, you know, a lot of these things should be recycled. They should be brought back, put up in front of modern audience and say, "Hey, you think anything's changed? Look at
Yeah.
this, you know? So that's what we do.
What do you think the tone was in America at that time?
What, in the 50s?
During the time of that, the original, when it was originally done.
When was
I mean, explain to our listeners what was the McCarthy thing? You know, what is?
I will tell you exactly what it was. It was
Mhm.
Here at the Wind was written in the early 50s. I'm going to say 51 or 52. At that point in time, America was in the grip of what was then known as the Red Scare. We were absolutely convinced by our politicians that communism was about to take over the United States, thus the way it had China. You know, this was just about the time of the Korean invasion. And obviously, people were concerned because there were congressional committees that were uncovering spies, Alger Hiss, the Rosenbergs, who were selling nuclear secrets to the Soviets. But then you had
21st, 1955.
Okay,
April
but that was
21st.
still right in the middle of Joseph McCarthy, who built his entire senatorial and political career around telling everybody that there were communists in the United States government. Blew it all out of proportion. It led to the blacklist in Hollywood, where all of the actors, many of whom we worked with, Ted and I worked with a lot of blacklisted actors, who lost not just their jobs, their careers for 10 or 15 years during their peak earning years because they were perceived to be friends of communists. So it was a time when people were terrified, and Inherit the Wind was really a play about tolerance, understanding other people's ideas, mixing faith with religion, or with mixing religion with science is not necessarily a bad thing. And so it was really about trying to get people to say, hey, calm down. It's not as bad as you think it might be. Well, what's changed?
Highly relevant today. Yeah.
You know, we're still terrified
totally
about one thing or another. And whether it's on the right or the left, it's the same argument. Don't read that. It's dangerous. Don't say that. You'll be fired. Okay. So that's the show we're going to do.
Nice.
Very nice. Very nice. So, Mark, sorry, I don't want to.
No, one thing that I wanted to bring up is one of our good friends is Brendan Wayne. And I mentioned that we were interviewing you guys, and his uncle came on your show about 5 times, Patrick Wayne.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, Patrick Wayne and
Those are some great episodes.
We got the giggles one time, and all we did was look at each other and bust up laugh. I don't know. It was a chemistry thing. We hit the same area, and Patrick Wayne and I just laughed. We got the
Brendan
work.
Is gonna love that.
Eventually, we got the work done, but we had a tough time getting out of those giggles. You know.
Wow.
Yeah, he was a good guy.
Yeah.
So we're talking about John Wayne's grandson, Brendan.
Yeah.
Who,
right. Patrick Wayne was his son.
He loves you
Yeah.
guys so much, and he wanted us. Well, he did. I wanted to mention to you how big of a fan he is of yours. You know, he's just he's got so much attention.
You never have enough fans.
Mandalorian, you know.
Yeah, and
working
I don't
for
know
Star
if you guys
Wars
knew
now
this, but he is the Mandalorian, and Pedro Pascal gets all the credit for it. He's the guy doing all the scenes.
Oh, okay.
He just does the voiceover and he's never on set. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well,
wow.
He's the guy in the suit. Brendan Wayne is the guy in the suit.
Exactly.
He does all the stunts and everything, right?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Actually,
he does
about 95% of the visual, the hard stunts. I'm throwing a number out there. The hard stunts are Lateef Crowder. So actually, Pedro doesn't even go there. He just kind of does this voice thing from his location, and
gets all the credit. Yeah,
you don't really hear enough about John Wayne's grandson really being on the screen almost all the time.
But I've watched The Mandalorian, so I've seen his credit. I didn't put it together that he was Patrick Wayne's son or John Wayne's grandson. But I've always thought, boy, The Mandalorian has to be the sweetest gig that Pedro Pascal will ever have. Guy doesn't have to leave his basement to do that show.
Yeah.
You know?
My friend is Carl Weathers.
Oh,
You know
Carl, we love
Weathers?
Carl Weathers. Yeah.
Okay, and he's now directing Mandalorian.
We know.
He's directing some of the episodes, but I'm going to ask him about this next time I see him because he didn't tell me that. That's a fun fact.
Yeah, Patrick is his uncle. So Brendan's uncle. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
But Patrick is John Wayne's son, right?
Exactly.
Right, yeah.
Yes.
That's what I thought. Yeah. Okay.
Got a daughter named Maria too. John Wayne had a daughter named Maria.
Brendan also coaches at Grant High
yeah.
School. He coaches soccer over at Grant High
Really?
School over in the Valley. Yeah, I'm sure
Yeah.
you know where that is. Over by Valley College. Yeah.
Okay.
I did one of my plays at Valley College. I did.
Oh, did you? I went there for a year or two before I went to Santa Monica College.
I did a play called George Washington's Boy, and we did it at Valley College. And actually, I had Bernie Coppell in the cast.
Wow.
Bernie played one of the characters in the play that we did.
Oh, nice.
And before Bernie, but at Valley College, I had Robert Pine, Fred.
From Chips.
Robert.
Remember?
Oh,
Robert
yeah. I know exactly
And
what you're talking about.
His son, Chris Pine, used to come and watch his dad in my plays.
No,
Wow.
Chris Pine.
Yeah, so
my
I
God.
told Robert, I said, this
I just
kid
saw
is
that
just as
Dungeons
much
and Dragons
my
thing.
son as your son because he came to see my play. He came to see you in my plays. So Chris is a great guy too. He's a real sweetheart.
Wow.
Sure.
Wow. I've watched pretty much
Valley
everything he's
College.
done.
Yeah. Unreal.
Yeah,
A lot of actors went to Valley College too before they were big.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So Fred, you did all that whole news thing, which I admire highly, but we won't talk about news right now. What other things did you do between the Love Boat and now and your news thing?
Well,
what else did you do? And maybe how did the strike? I meant to ask you earlier, maybe if you want to throw in how the strike affected you overall. I know if you might have a story like Ted or someone you know close to you know.
Well, I'm very quickly, I left Love Boat to run for Congress. Won a seat in Congress from Iowa, served 8 years, left that in about 1995 and became the president and chief executive officer of Goodwill Industries, the empire of old clothes. And
the empire of old clothes.
What made you run for office? I admire that very, very much.
Well, I'm from Iowa, and Iowa was going through a hard time back in the late 70s, and I had worked for a guy who was a congressman from my hometown, which is Sioux City. And I was naive enough to think that, Iowa could use a guy like me. If I'd really thought about it, I would have talked myself out of it, but happily I didn't.
Did you get into that because you thought you would like it, or because you thought you needed to take care of something as a citizen or something like patriotic?
I guess I was at a point where I wanted to serve something a little larger than myself, and I thought this would be a good way to do it. And miraculously I won, and then I kept winning, and I stayed for a while, and then I left and I took over Goodwill Industries, and Goodwill Industries is usually known for collecting old clothes, but what they really do is use all of that revenue to provide employment and training for people with disabilities. So I was essentially a disability advocate for about 5 years. And then I left that and became a news talk radio host in Washington for about 10 years, and worked with a partner of mine named Andy Parks. And we had a show called the Grandy and Andy Morning Show. And then I kind of burned out of Washington and realized that I wanted to get back to work with people that I could trust. And that was people in show business.
Oh, I love that.
So
that was the big takeaway.
But when I tried to get back into the business, it was if, I'd never been here, because most of the people that I knew had either, retired or died, people that were hiring. So I had to kind of start all over again. But I got hired on a show called The Mindy Project, and Mindy Kaling, who you probably know, who had been on The Office with my son Charlie, who was a writer there. She had been a huge Love Boat fan. So
okay.
I had kind of a leg up, and it turned out as I've gotten jobs, people like Mindy Kaling and Tina Fey, who's obviously a powerhouse. Wow. All of these women grew up with Love Boat. They loved it. So people like Ted and I were like part of their extended family.
That's just a part of history that could there will never, ever, ever, ever be any situation like that ever again. It's so great.
They had a kind of bond with us that I don't think you get these days from a television show.
Indeed.
I don't think any of us, we may have liked Succession, but I don't see us bonding with Jeremy Strong.
That's classic.
Great. Okay, but television, particularly a show like The Love Boat was so friendly and familiar and made people feel good about themselves, which unfortunately programs don't do much anymore. But as I learned, this new generation of performers, some of whom are now, essentially entrepreneurs like Mindy Kaling and Tina Fey and people like that, they said, "Oh yeah, let's get Ted, let's get Fred," and that helped me to get going again. So that's what I've been doing. As far as the strike is concerned, I think it's going to go for a long time, the writer's strike.
But I think it's going to 100 days at least.
At least, and you're really not going to see any movement until around July or so, because that's when the networks, ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox, who have fall lineups, are going to have to say, "Hey, we're not going to have anything ready for the fall unless we figure out how to negotiate with these guys," and that may speed up the negotiations. But if the actors go out, and we just voted 97% to do that, then I think the studios will be more inclined to negotiate, because they'll say, "Oh my God, nobody's working now." And if the actors aren't working, then none of the crew is working either. Okay,
yeah.
The grips, the gaffers, all
below
of the people,
line, as they say,
all the people below the line, makeup, hair, all of those people, they don't work either.
Has anything like this ever happened before? Like a big strike like this?
Sure. Yeah.
What was the last thing that happened? I don't know.
We had a strike one year where Aaron Spelling arranged us to do 2 shows remember that, Fred?
Well,
we would go off of, huh?
Refresh my memory on this.
He was trying to avert a strike by getting product in the can. So we did 2 shows at once. Mm-hmm. We would do one show on the Lido deck, and after you finish doing that, and I don't know how they arranged this. It was brilliant the way they did it, but we would do scenes on the Lido deck, then we'd go over to the Acapulco Lounge and work on and going with 2 different directors, and crews were going both at once to get the product in the can, so he didn't have to worry when the strike came. And he did it. We finished the shows that we were supposed to do. Yeah.
Yeah. The writers I know went out in 2007. There was a big actor strike in the early 80s, but as I recall, and that was all over cable TV. But that didn't last too long. They made a deal. I mean, strikes are usually bad for everybody, but in this case, if the writers and the actors don't make a stand over things like streaming and AI, I don't know what'll happen to them. So,
who do you think has the upper hand really right now? The platforms
right now, the studios do. The platforms do, because they've got so much product in the can. To people sitting at home watching Netflix or Amazon, they don't even know there's a strike going on unless they watch the news. The networks as I say, if they don't have full shows to put in front of an audience come September and October, then people will start saying, "Hey, what's going on? Where are my shows? How come there's no Chicago PD anymore?" And that will cause an uproar. But as of right now, no, the studios have all the upper hand.
Yeah.
So, but we'll see. You know, it's these are the throes of the business. If it's not the pandemic, it's a labor strike.
Yeah.
And
Do you
we
think
have
this-
weathered it all, haven't we, my brother?
Yes, we have, my friend. Yes,
we have weathered it all.
But
Still
for you
here.
guys, people want to come out because of the pandemic. People want to get out. They want to watch a play, you know, so it
I
should
think you're
benefit
right.
you guys. Whether it be a concert or a
It-
play, they want to get out, you know?
Yeah. Audiences obviously stayed home during the pandemic, and they're still kind of slow to come back out. But I've noticed in some of the shows I've done, it's a little more hesitant for people our age. Older people, I think, maybe because they're more worried about their health. But guys like you and a generation maybe a little older than you, they're coming out. They want to get out. They want to start living their
They want to
lives again.
see Tom Cruise in an airplane.
Yeah. Yeah. And hopefully they'll want to see us and Inherit the Wind or
Yeah,
Give 'em Hell, Harry.
exactly.
Oh, they will.
We're gonna do I'm Not Rappaport in Michigan again next spring. So
Yeah, next year.
hopefully.
Oh, nice.
Hopefully
What city
they'll
are
come
you
out.
going to be in Michigan for that one?
Well, we're actually going to be. The town is Dexter, Michigan, which is just outside of Ann Arbor.
Oh, I know it
But
well. I'm
there's a
from
great-
Grand Rapids, so.
Okay,
Oh,
well,
okay.
there's a theater there called the Encore Theater, and that I did Harry there, and got to know the people. And one of our colleagues, a guy named Vince Cardinal, who teaches at the University of Michigan in their music and drama program, is on their board of directors, and he has been trying to get them to do Rappaport because he directed us in Syracuse, and he's finally made that deal. So that's where we'll be in April next year. But they draw from Ann Arbor and even Detroit in some cases. 'Cause
Oh,
it's about an
sure.
hour.
Toledo too,
about an
I
hour.
think. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an hour out of Detroit. So
Mhm.
anyway,
That's wonderful.
Yeah,
Well,
and the pandemic has really calmed down now. You know, I mean,
yeah.
you don't see as many masks on people as before. You know, but the interesting thing, I think people are politer now than before the pandemic. You know,
Yeah.
people are. You go to the grocery store, you go to the supermarket. People are really, you know, they're much better now.
You think they
You know?
appreciate things a little more now? Maybe they don't. I kind of do. It's
I do
like, you
too.
know, I can see how easily things can really fall apart just on.
Yeah.
Now, this could have been really bad and a lot worse. And maybe we panicked a little bit here and there, but thank goodness, you know, everything turned out okay. But
Yeah.
I think it made me appreciate the fragile state that we can be in just suddenly and overnight.
well, I do not want to disagree with my distinguished colleague, but I can tell you the pandemic broke up a lot of marriages.
Oh.
I mean,
Oh.
you know,
Oh,
geez.
there were a lot of people who thought togetherness was going to be great, and then
Yeah, there was.
and then all of a sudden the guy was home all day long.
yeah.
Oh, jeez.
Funny.
Yeah.
But I
Yes.
lost a lot of friends. I mean, I have friends that were over 65, 70 years old. That pandemic went right in there, and that was the end of it, you know, because people were getting various things about what to do, what not to do, you know. And I lost some one friends to the virus.
Yeah. Bless
But
their
we
hearts. That
all lost friends.
Yeah,
in some cases, even family to the pandemic. But
Bless them all.
you know, you just have to keep going.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, we kept Harry going during the pandemic, and this theater that I was telling you about in Michigan, we did it in the dead of winter. It was like December, and it's colder than hell in Michigan at that time, and there was snow all over the place. And one Saturday matinee, we lost power at the theater.
Okay.
And so I went to the theater. I was going to do the show, and they said, "Do you want to even go on stage? I mean, we've got 2 work lights, and the sound system isn't working." And I said, "Have you got people in the lobby?" And they said, "Yeah, we got a whole bunch of people out there." I said, "We're doing the damn show." They got in their cars, they came to this thing, and it was a small enough theater, so I used a microphone, but I didn't really need it. And it was one of the best shows we ever did, because it was like we were all there. We were braving the pandemic, we were braving the weather, and we are going to watch this show come hell or high water.
Mm-hmm.
And I said to myself, Truman would have done this, so I'm going to do it.
Nice. I like that.
Do you know that story about Bernie Kopell? He was doing a play in the Valley at the Whitefire Theater, and the lights went out.
Wow.
And his wife, Katrina, went down to the supermarket and bought flashlights and gave them to the audience. And the audience held flashlights up while Bernie finished the second act of the play. And Robert Pine. It was Bernie and Robert Pine were doing a comedy.
See,
they gave flashlights out to the audience because it had been raining and the power shot out the light.
Yeah, well, that's essentially, it was a snowstorm in my case in Michigan.
Yeah.
But that's the kind of thing that you get with live theater you get nowhere else.
Yeah.
You get a kind of bond with the audience that you'll never get on the film set. Even if you're doing, a sitcom in front of an audience, you don't get that kind of collegiality and communality that you get when you're doing a live show. And things don't have to go wrong, but if they do, you just deal with it.
Yeah.
My daughter, my oldest daughter, is an actress, Mariah Grandy, and she's currently in the national tour of Into the Woods, which is coming to LA in July. My brother, you've got to come down there and see her.
Okay, absolutely.
So anyway, and she has said that they lose people, not so much now, but they started the tour in February, and they were losing a person a week out of the cast because of the pandemic. But you just had to deal with it. The understudies would go on. She's an understudy, and she's gone on 8 or 9 times now because people bounce in and out. But the audience, they're showing up, they want to see the show, and they're braving the elements. And you don't get that when you're making a movie. You don't get that sense of the audience, which is, to me, that's the reason you do this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. And I bet they were so thankful that you just did that, and it's like you said, it's almost like being in an emergency with someone where you bond,
It is.
Mm-hmm.
It's like we were all pinned in.
Yeah.
And as I say, it was
a camaraderie or something.
Shows we did. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, I bet they were so thankful. Well, I'm thankful you guys made it through that whole COVID thing, and we're all here today. I mean, how did you two meet, by the way? Was it on Love Boat? Is that the first time you guys met?
Well,
Uh-oh.
Yes, it was. We met on the set of Love Boat.
Well, actually,
let me tell you this story. The opening scene that we had to do was a poker game. It was me, Fred, Bernie Kopell. A different guy was playing the captain. And
yeah, because we made what, 3 pilots for the show, but we only made 2 of them. They made 3 pilots, and we did the last 2.
And else was Captain Steubing? Anyone we know? No.
No, it was a guy named Ted Hamilton. He was an Australian actor. Anyway, we're sitting at a poker table. The guy, not Ted Hamilton. Ted Hamilton's in the
Quinn Rediker.
Quinn Rediker.
Quinn Rediker.
Okay, so he was a soap opera actor, but he wasn't comfortable with comedy. So he got a little nervous. And at one point, they were shooting the scene, and he says to the cameraman, cut. And the director was a guy named Hy Averback. Hy Averback came out of radio. He had the smoothest voice you ever heard. and he read this guy, this actor, the riot act about saying cut, because it's the director's job to say cut. Okay? So me and Fred are looking at each other going, wow, this guy's rough. So then they did a close-up on Bernie. And Bernie got the giggles. Right? You remember that, Fred?
Yeah.
And they did everything they could to keep Bernie from laughing. So Fred and I look at this. We didn't want to be yelled at by this director. And we saw Quinn go down in flames, and then Bernie was floating around somewhere out in space. So Fred and I got up from the table. We went to a corner of the studio and we ran our lines. We just ran our lines. And when we came back, we were on it. But we bonded when we said, because we looked at each other.
Yeah.
We're young kids. We're
Yeah.
young kids. And
How old were you? Seriously.
High Averback was rough, baby. But Fred and I came back and we did the hell out of our scene.
I think we were like 28 or 29 when we started on the show.
Yeah.
Very young.
Under 30. But that thing with Bernie, the line that he had to say
Oh, yes.
was, I say El Dumpo. We're talking about a woman. I say El Dumpo. What do you say, Gopher? Well, he couldn't get it out of his mouth.
Oh,
He would say, I say El Grumpo. What do you say? Wait a minute. Okay. All right. I'm ready. Bernie, do you need a glass of water? No, I'm good. I say El Dumpo. What do you grumble? Okay. I'm good. Good.
Wow.
He put a nail in his hand to keep from laughing. Okay.
Oh my gosh.
And it's the first day of shooting. So all of us think we're going to be fired, because that's standard. And Bernie had been around forever, and
they asked him to squeeze on the nail to drive it into the palm of his hand,
so
and it will keep him from laughing.
Yeah. And it was one of these things. And we said, we got to get out of here, get our stuff together, come back and score. And we did. And then, we walked out of the set saying, well, at least they know they got two guys they can count on.
Great.
Wow. That worked out very well. It's a good thing you got a sneak peek at that guy in advance. And wow, went and got your game together before you went back in. That was really smart.
Gotta have game.
Wow.
Gotta have game.
Yeah.
Wow.
We still do that. We still get our
shit
right?
Yeah. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
That is awesome. Well, I guess that kind of caps off a good hour. If you're not careful, I'm going to start asking you things and take another hour of your time. So where can everyone get a look at you? And please direct our viewers to something where they can see what you're doing.
Well, I am going to be at the Goodwill Theater on October 7th and 8th doing Give 'Em Hell, Harry. And that's in Binghamton, New York. Then Ted and I are going to be in Syracuse, New York in the end of February, early March doing Inherit the Wind. He's directing, I'm playing the lead. And then we're going to be at this Encore Theater in Michigan from the 11th of April to the 22nd doing I'm Not Rappaport. I've got a couple of other things that I've lined up, but I'm reluctant to talk about them yet because I haven't signed on the dotted line. But that's kind of where we're going to be doing our stuff together.
Yeah, and I'm going to be directing a production of Death of a Salesman October 28th in San Francisco.
Nice.
So if you're close to the city there, come on down. It'll be it's at the African American Shakespeare Company of San Francisco.
And Ted, where can people see your past plays and all these past things?
My plays are on Amazon.
You get all these plays on Amazon.
Great.
Yeah, you type in my name,
there
go to Amazon,
it'll come up. Yeah. Okay.
And they'll all come up.
Nice.
Yeah. It's about a dozen of them on there.
Wow. I so appreciate you guys being here.
This was great.
It's so cool that you guys still work together and you're doing all this stuff together. And gosh, you seem as busy as ever. And it's just a real treat being here with you. And I really appreciate your time. Really.
Yeah.
Thank you guys very much.
And Ted, anytime you want to come back and promote anything you're doing, please do
Yeah.
not hesitate. We would love to do anything we can for you.
Same
It'd be a
thing,
real
Fred.
treat for us
I'll
too,
try to make
Fred,
it up there
yes.
in Michigan. So
Okay, all right.
I got an aunt who lives right by there in Temperance, Michigan, which is like 20 minutes away. She would probably go too.
Hey.
So
Yeah,
Yeah, go visit your aunt, Mark.
yeah,
I'll get you a ticket. They
Nice.
know me there.
Wow.
excellent.
Hey,
great.
make them buy you a drink after the show. That's what
There
I
we
do.
go. Yeah.
All right.
That's for the bartender, Isaac. to
Yeah,
do.
right.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
Gentlemen.
Thanks, guys.
Okay.
Take care,
Been an honor.
guys.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.